Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today, I'm talking about ESG and its impact on your data strategy. With COP26 underway, this climate change is certainly at the top of the agenda for governments, for countries, for activists, and organizations across the world. It's really galvanized everyone together. It's a really galvanizing topic. It's a divisive topic, and one that's getting a huge amount of press and attention, and rightly so. Climate and climate change is just one component of the term that you may be increasingly aware of and hearing, which is ESG. And ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And it's the crashing together of many concepts and principles that have been knocking around for about 5-10 years, maybe even longer. It's trying to pull it together under kind of a collective umbrella. So previously terms like CSR, corporate social responsibility, sustainability, which is clearly a word that will continue, but has been around for a while, green strategies, triple bottom line, and many others like it have been used for a long time. So ESG and the emerging kind of regulation, frameworks, initiatives that sit alongside it starts to try and bring some consistency, at least at the conceptual level, to the concepts and the ideas and the work that needs to be done around environmental, social, and governance activity, which I'm going to define for you just shortly. In a report I read recently by Solidartis, the technology company, they report that the acronym ESG was mentioned a record 129 times by companies in the S&P 500 index on the recent fourth quarter earnings calls, compared with 70 in the same quarter a year earlier. And the search term, when I looked it up, ESG on Google, has grown 300% over the last 5 years and 53% just in the last 12 months. So it's clearly a topic that is becoming more known, more regular, people care about more, and it will be at the heart, much of it will be at the heart of what's being discussed at COP26. As I said, ESG itself is made up of three broad elements. There's the environmental, which focuses on the factors that impact the environment, funnily enough. So topics such as combating climate change, talking about renewable energy and resources, the circular economy on products and what we do with plastics and how single-use plastics get recycled and put back in to the system, damage caused by environmental conditions, emissions, carbon footprint, waste and contamination. All of these things are collected together under the E, the environmental part of ESG. Society starts to look at the responsibility we and businesses and corporates and governments have for stakeholders. So the employees, for customers, for partners. It's interested in their welfare and the relationship we build with them. It cares about the community relations, diversity and inclusion, human rights, importantly, and keeping people safe. Really, it's about caring for the community around us and doing the right thing to build a society that we all want to be part of and are proud to be part of. Governance then looks at the transparency and accountability that corporate organizations and governments need to have in place to manage things like their legal obligation, avoid corruption, looking at cybersecurity, the ethics of the business, the diversity of the board at the board level, and risk management more generally across the organizations. So those are the three kind of big, broad top elements of ESG, and there's lots within that. It's a very complex space. But how is all this relevant to data and data strategy? I guess an organization's decision to care about and action any of the elements of ESG, or indeed if regulation forces the issue against any of those components that I mentioned, then it needs to become part of their business strategy. It needs to be someone's responsibility. It needs to have some operational activity that's carried around it. Like anything that becomes a business, a key part or a key thing that an organization is interested in, if that was managing, getting new customers, then that needs to be part of the business strategy. Someone needs to be responsible for it. We need some work done and some initiatives carried out to make it happen. It's the same with ESG. It needs to become part of the fabric of the organization. It needs to become a key component or an innovation or R&D project, however it's positioned within the organization, but it needs to be a piece of activity, a strategic objective that sits at a board level, leadership team level, and filters through the organization to make sure that it's something that business cares about. Now, a good data strategy is about delivering business value that aligns to that business strategy. and the work required to make the change. So in some ways, ESG is simply another use case. All those things are just another use case to manage and deliver as part of a data strategy. So if, for example, an organization defines that a reduction in its carbon footprint is a critical objective, then its ability to measure, track, and improve its carbon footprint is a necessary output of a data strategy. So if you're leading a data strategy, or if you're a product manager collecting what the key requirements are and the key use cases are, then the ability to understand, manage, and improve the organization's carbon footprint needs to be part of what we care and what we think about. The problem with ESG data, by and large, though, is that it is very inconsistent. It's not properly defined, it's not properly verified, it's not properly standardized across different organizations, different data sets. There aren't really any international accounting standards for ESG at the time of recording this. The verification and audit processes and approaches aren't really consistent. There's competing and often conflicting reporting standards for regulation, for ESG. There aren't really any standard definitions for ESG metrics. There are many definitions, but no standardization across metrics. The data that's needed is often across and spread across multiple and global data sources, and the data itself can be very complex, very unstructured data. So it's quite hard to get hold of. It's quite hard to use and manage effectively for many people. Again, these challenges, some more than others, are prevalent in all areas of business when we're looking at data strategy. Data silos, lack of ownership, poorly defined metrics, and so on. However, back to my example of the carbon footprint objective. In order to align this with our data strategy, we need to do some things. We need to define the relevant metrics that will help us understand what our current carbon footprint is and track accordingly in terms of whether we're improving our carbon footprint. We need to understand who's responsible for those metrics. Who does this sit with? Who owns the metric? Who's judged on whether we're improving our carbon footprint or not? We need to know what data that is required in order to properly measure and track our carbon footprint. Which internal and third-party platforms does that data come from? And what logic do we need to apply and rules do we need to apply to that data to bring it together to create the metric of what our carbon footprint is? You might need to build, for example, new data pipelines with your landlord to bring in data about the energy efficiency of your buildings. You might need to implement a new system for your manufacturing process to capture wastage. So we need to go from that top level business objective of improving our carbon footprint and bring it down to a level that our data strategy can take, consume, and deliver some value back. So when you are defining or refreshing your data strategy, you've got to make sure that ESG is considered, and that if it's considered and it's important to your business, then it's certainly important to your data strategy. We need to understand the business objective around it. We need to understand the measures that are associated with tracking that objective. We need to be clear on the data that's required. We need to build a plan that brings the data together and develops the reporting required in order for us to better assess our carbon footprint in that example. So that's my quick run through of what ESG is, why it's important and relevant to data and your data strategy. Love to hear people that are getting on top of this already, people that are thinking about it, people that are doing it really well, people that have not yet started but are starting to think about it, and it'd be great to have a conversation around that. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you again sometime soon.